What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Busy Dad's Board Gaming. My name is Neil Odette, and today I'm going to teach you the 1 to 4 player exploration game Silicon Saga: Wreck of the Andromeda. This was designed by Matthew Hudson and published by Rusted Gear Games. So let's dive in and learn how to play. Actually, one second. Before we dive in, I should mention that Silicon Saga is coming to Kickstarter on February 2021. This is just a game prototype. What you'll see here in terms of components may not be indicative of the final product. As well, even though I'm working closely with the designers to ensure that every rule mentioned in this video is up to date and accurate, there may be some changes, albeit small, between the shooting of this video and the final release of the game. As changes happen and I'm made aware of them, I will ensure to put them in the description below for you to check out. Now, with all that being said, let's dive in and learn how to play. To set up, first place the crew status board beside the play area. Place the hangar tile at the center of the play area and shuffle the remaining tiles to form a stack. You can also place the tile effect reference guide nearby. This explains any specific effects that might occur on a given tile. Form a supply of the following tokens: unlock tokens as well as the survivor tokens, search tokens, fabric components, electrical components, food tokens, ammo tokens, metal components, and silicon. You can also place the crew die nearby the supply. Separate out the survivor cards marked advanced, as you can see here, and return them to the box or set them aside for now, as they will come into play later. Shuffle the remaining survivor cards to form the survivor deck. Shuffle the event cards to form an event deck, and then do the same with the search cards. As a group, select a threat. As of right now, I have an option between Siren and the Peacekeepers. For this how to play, I'll be selecting the Siren to face off against. Find the components as indicated on the backside of the threat board and follow any setup instructions. When it is complete, it should look something like this, with the Siren threat to the left, Siren's riddle to the right, Siren's strike deck down here where it shows strike deck, and a marker on the 0 space of the threat level track. Separate out gear cards marked as starter cards as shown here by having the individual character's symbol in the top right corner. And shuffle the remaining gear cards to form the gear deck. Next, we will form the skill index. As a group, select 8 skills to play with for this game. I will be taking the following: regroup, close combat, charm, dodge, humble approach, planned betrayal, tactical analysis, and overdrive. Take the index cards for each chosen skill and pile them in order of experience cost from the lowest to the highest, with the available side up. Players will be able to spend the appropriate amount of experience through the adventure in order to gain these new skills. Now, as the amount of skills you can gain from each is limited, there is an available side as well as an unavailable side. This lets players track the availability of a given skill. For each skill you've chosen and put into the skill index, take a number of corresponding skill cards equal to the player count, 2 if you're playing solo. As this is a 2-player game, I will take 2 of each skill. These form what is called the skill library. Sort these cards by type and experience cost similar to those in the skill index. Place all wound cards at the bottom of the skill library and choose 1 player to distribute skill cards from the library for the rest of the game. Each player will then select a crew member. Take the corresponding character boards, figures, and marker pools and place the character board in front of you. Then take your 20 markers, 9 of your chosen color, 9 white, and 2 black. Place 1 of your chosen color, as well as 1 white, in your marker pool bag. Place 1 white on the action track at the space mark 0, and place 1 of your chosen color on the crew status board at level 1. Place your remaining markers on your board in the spaces provided on the left side. Don't worry, there will be unfilled spaces. Take the Assist Engage cards. Starting skills and starting gear for your crew member, all denoted by their matching symbol in the corner of the card, and return any unused crew boards, markers, and cards to the box. Remove your gear cards and shuffle your personal skill cards to form your skill deck, and place it in the space marked on your board. Keep your gear and Assist Engage cards in your hand. Take 1 food and 2 ammo tokens and place them on your board in the marked spaces. Take a random objective card and look at it, but do not reveal it to the other players. Place it face down on the file space by your board. After players have selected their crew members and completed their crew setup, determine player numbers. To do so, each player adds a marker matching their color to a single bag. Draw markers from the bag one at a time. Players are numbered consecutively in the order in which their markers are drawn. The player whose marker is drawn first is the first player. Return the markers to the respective players and take your player number card and place it face up on your file space on top of your objective. Place your figure on the hanger tile in the space marked with your player number. And that's it. That's the setup. Players have docked their ship, the Atlas, to the wreck of the Andromeda. It's up to the players to gather silicon, a widely sought after resource, and return back to the Atlas before time runs out. All the while fighting off threats and helping or intimidating other individuals that they may encounter along the way. Silicon Saga can be played either cooperatively, competitively, or solo. In either of those cases, players have to gather enough silicon and make it back to the hangar before the Atlas leaves after 10 rounds. The amount of silicon you require depends on 1, the mode you're playing, and 2, how many players there are. In this 2-player cooperative setup that we have going on here, we require 10 silicon before we can head back to the hangar and depart on the Atlas. Do you have what it takes to get this highly sought after resource and get off this ship before it's too late? There's only one way to find out. Silicon Saga is played over a series of rounds, each of which are divided into 3 phases: the crew phase, the threat phase, and the recovery phase. Starting off with the crew phase, players take turns performing actions to explore the wreck of the Andromeda and engage any survivors or threats that they may encounter. At the start of the crew phase, first check if any players enter an encounter. Some threats, for example, the soldiers for the peacekeepers, shown by this token, move during the threat phase according to the rules for a chosen threat. Players on the same space as a threat at the beginning of the crew phase immediately encounter it. This will happen when playing against the peacekeepers, as I mentioned, but just know that this encounter happens just like any other, which will be explained shortly. Next, each player must perform a free search, starting with the player holding the first player token and proceeding clockwise. This does not require you to have a search token in your space, and if there is one, you do not remove it. So in the case of this free search, starting with RBC06, he would receive a food token, which gets placed on his character board, and Tessera would receive a free silicone, which gets placed on the crew pack. Players who are on the hangar tile in an encounter or who are exhausted do not perform a free search. Therefore, no one would search during the first round as everyone starts on the hangar tile. After their free search, all players will draw skill cards and recover actions as indicated by their level. As you can see here, at level 1, we draw 2 cards and have 3 actions. Players will then take turns performing 1 action per turn by playing a card from their hand, beginning with the player holding the first player token and proceeding clockwise. You may pass to avoid performing an action on your turn, and this may be done strategically in order to perform an action later in the phase or because you have no other choice. If you pass twice in the same round, lose all remaining actions and set your action track to 0. Actions you can perform on your turn are as follows. You can trade 1 item or gear card with another player on the same tile. So in this case, Tessera decides to trade with RBC06 and they swap their cards. You can use your character ability found on your character board. For example, Ozu the Oracle states that once per turn you can spend 1 action to search in any location on your tile, regardless of the distance. You can access the Fabricator, shown by this symbol here in the top corner of this tile. This allows you to craft new gear or repair broken gear. You can play skill or gear cards from your hand, or you can search a space that you occupy that holds a search token. There are actions that do not require you to spend an action point. As mentioned before, you can pass on your turn. You can also play assist engage cards from your hand in order to help your teammates. And lastly, you can spend 1 food token in order to gain 1 additional action for each food token spent this way. All of these actions will be explained in further detail later, but as a reminder, the number of actions you recover in the crew phase is determined by your level listed on the crew status board. For each action you perform, make sure to decrease the marker on your action track by 1. When your action track is at 0, you may not take any more actions. Let's expand a little bit more on actions. As mentioned, on your turn, you can search. When moving onto a space with a search token, stop moving and search the location without spending an action. However, if you happen to begin your turn on a space with a search token, you may spend an action to search it. So in this case, where I started my turn on this location with a search token, if I wanted to search it, I can spend 1 action. However, if I wanted to move, I could move to this space, in which point my movement would immediately stop, and I am forced to search this location without spending an action. When searching, remove the token from your space, and if there are multiple tokens on the space, only remove 1. Reveal the top card of the search deck and receive the listed item, draw an event card, or encounter a survivor depending on what is shown on the card. Receive 1 item token for each item symbol shown. When finding gear, take the top card of the gear deck. These are the cards that you will encounter in the search deck. If you come across these, find whatever is depicted on the card. Either silicon, ammo, components, food, or nothing. If you see this symbol, you found gear. Take the top card of the gear deck and put it in your hand. This means you resolve an event, and this means you encounter the top card of the survivor deck. When instructed to draw an event from the search deck, reveal the top card of the event deck and read the uppermost section of the card out loud. This is the narrative and explains to you your current predicament. If the card contains multiple sections below the narrative section, determine which section applies to you, as described on the card. Read any flavor text included in the applicable section and process any effects. There are a few different ways that the applicable section of the event may be determined. There's a direct choice, which means there is only 1 possible result for the event. Some event cards have a minimum player count requirement. If fewer players are playing the game, discard the event and ignore it. Do not reveal another one. There are free choice events. These allow you, the player that drew the event, to select any one result. There are player-determined events. The character you chose to play as will determine the choice that you must take. And lastly, there are marker-determined events. Draw a marker from your pool bag to determine the result of the event. Then return the marker to your pool. Luckily, each crew member is equipped with a scanner that helps you detect nearby silicon. The backside of each card shows the current reading on the scanner. Scanner readings are indicated by colored rings. They represent the risk of encountering an entity as well as the likelihood of finding better rewards when searching. Search cards with readings closer to the center of the scanner are more likely to contain silicon, gear, or survivors than cards with readings further from the center. You can also trade an item or gear, or even pick up items in your space. There are certain effects that would cause you to drop an item. If you're presented with any one of these symbols that have a drop word above it, place the applicable items in an adjacent space. If the item type is not specified, you may choose. When instructed to drop multiple items, or if there are previously dropped items on adjacent spaces, evenly distribute the dropped items so that there are roughly the same amount on each space. During the crew phase, you may spend 1 action on your turn to give 1 gear card or 1 item you possess to another player on the same tile. You may request one gear or item card in exchange, but it's not required. Exchange gear or items must be agreed upon by both players before they change hands. So in this case, Tessera, who picked up a thermite fuse, is going to give this to RBC06. This will go directly into their hand. A big part of your turn during the crew phase will actually be spent playing skill and gear cards from your hand. Skill cards look like this. It has a skill label to let you know that it is in fact a skill description, which is more or less just the name of the skill, the amount of experience the skill costs when trying to learn it during the recovery phase, experience gained from playing it on its explore or engage side if there's any, and finally, its explore actions and its engage actions. Gear is set up similarly with just a few differences. Again, you have its label letting you know that it's gear, its description or name, the gear type, of which there are 3, consumable, enhancement, and projectile. There is also a potential that it will allow you to gain experience depending on if it's used to explore or engage. And just like skill cards, it has the explore and engage side letting you know what action is used given the situation. Some cards will, however, only have one or the other. In the case of the thermite fuse, you're only able to use this during an engagement. When using actions to play skill or gear cards, you may only play cards directly from your hand. When you play a skill or gear card during the crew phase, only information shown on the explore side of that card is used when you're not engaged in an encounter. In an encounter, only information shown on the engage side of the card is used. All effects shown on the relevant side of the card must be completed in order from top to bottom, left to right. Before we go any further, let's talk about the symbols that you will find on the skill and gear cards that you play. First, we have the lock or unlock door symbol. When playing a card with this symbol, you may lock or unlock a door on your tile. Place a token with the locked or unlocked side on the door when its status differs from that depicted by the colored lights shown on the tile. This symbol allows you to draw one skill card from your personal skill deck, putting it into your hand. This symbol gives you one additional action per symbol during the round. Although this one looks similar to the one on the Explore side, this just lets you perform a bonus action. When you receive a bonus action from a skill card, do not increase your action track. Instead, you may immediately perform another action on your turn. This symbol allows you to flee an encounter. When fleeing, you do not receive a reward or face the setbacks of an encounter. If you initiated the encounter, it ends and any assisting player flees as well. The encounter is not considered resolved successfully for the purposes of the end of the round. With this symbol, you can heal one wound that you have suffered. When in an encounter, it is likely that you will get wounded and have to draw a wound card. When you play a skill with this symbol, you search your discard pile and only your discard pile for one wound card. Return the wound card to the skill library, and if there are no wound cards in your discard pile, the healing has no effect. You also have the opportunity to sabotage other players, especially in the competitive mode. When this symbol appears on a card, or when otherwise directed to sabotage a player, you may select any one other player and force them to drop one item of your choosing. You may sabotage players regardless of their distance from you unless directed otherwise. Anytime you see a marker symbol on the action you're resolving, either one of your character color, black or white, that means you add a marker of that color from your character board to your pool. That will come into effect during encounters and in some cases events. The next two symbols are only applicable when encountering hostile entities. Perform one strike or deal one damage for each shown. Strikes can cause damage to hostile entities, however we'll talk about that in further detail in just a little bit. Whereas the next three symbols, perform one dialogue, earn one fear, or earn one trust, are only applicable when dealing with peaceful entities. This gun symbol is only found on gear cards and lets you know that at the end of the round, you need to roll a crew die to see whether or not your gear breaks. More on that shortly. Whenever this symbol appears on a played card, you may attempt to steal from one other player who is on the same tile as you. Roll the crew die to determine the outcome. Rolling this or this on the crew die allows you to steal 2 or 1 silicone respectively, whereas this one, with the question marks in the center, allows you to steal 2 components of your choice. If you were to roll this breaks the gear card that you were using to steal. Lastly, when playing a skill or gear card with this symbol, that is pairs of feet, for each pair shown, you must move 1 space if possible. You may move between spaces that share sides separated by dashed gray lines, or an unlocked door. You may move through other players, but you may not end your move on a space occupied by another player. You may not move diagonally through walls or through locked doors. The only exception to having to move a number of times equal to the number of symbols shown on the skill or gear card is when moving onto a space with a search token. When you move onto a space with a search token, even if you have additional movements to complete, your move ends and you must search immediately. In this case, you do not spend additional actions for this type of search. If you played a card with more move symbols than spaces moved, the additional moves are lost. Through exploration, you'll also find access shafts as seen here by the orange and blue lights. Access shafts are shown to be either orange or blue, and when on a space with an access shaft, you may move to any other space on the revealed tile with the same colored shaft. When moving through a door at a tile's edge, reveal the top tile from the stack and place it so that one door on the new tile is aligned with the door you move through. Tiles should be placed logically so that blocked doors are avoided when possible. When revealing a new tile, place 1 search token on any space marked with a question mark as seen here. Many tiles have specific effects. They may be activated when moving into or revealing a tile. They may also grant new types of actions that can be performed from the tile, like the bridge for instance, which states, while on this tile, spend 1 action and discard a search token to lock or unlock any revealed door. If a tile's title is colored purple, as we can see here with the kitchen, check the reference to determine the tile's effect. Doors on newly revealed tiles are either locked or unlocked by default, as indicated by the color of the light depicted on the tile above the door. Green for unlocked, red for locked. When moving through an unlocked door and revealing a new tile, you may place the new tile so that the locked door connects to the door you pass through. In this case, the door is locked from both sides until unlocked by a player. Some of the rooms you may encounter have this symbol. This signifies a Fabricator. While on the space with a Fabricator, you may spend 1 action to access it. When accessing a Fabricator, you may do one of the following. First, you may craft new gear. If you would craft new gear, reveal the top 4 cards of the gear deck. You may craft as many of the revealed gear cards as you can afford. To craft a gear card, discard all the components shown in the materials section of the card. Add all crafted gear to your hand and shuffle any revealed gear cards that you are not crafting back into the gear deck. So in this case, the only gear we can craft is the bandages, which cost 3 fabric. So we can go ahead and remove those from our character board, returning them to the supply. We can grab the bandage card from the 4 that we drew and then add it to our hand. Another action you could complete is to repair broken gear. There is a potential for your gear to break when being used, which will be explained in the end of round cleanup. If you do have broken gear, you can repair it at a Fabricator. For each gear card in your broken pile, you may discard components shown in the materials section of the card to repair it. You may ignore any 2 listed components of your choice. When the gear cards are repaired, they're returned to your hand. When playing skill or gear cards, if the following symbols are shown on the played card, you may choose whether or not to perform the effects. Unlock or lock a door, sabotage, or steal. In all other cases, effects need to be completed in order from top to bottom, left to right, as mentioned before. When playing cards, place them in a row above your character board. They will remain here until the end of the round. Played cards should create a comic strip of sorts depicting the events of the round. Skill and gear cards played while exploring are placed from right to left at the left side of the row. Cards that are split into explore and engage sides should be slid underneath the card to their right so that only the explored side is shown. When you encounter an entity, place an assist engage card to the right of the entity card with the engage side face up. The assist engage card must match the type of encountered entity. For example, you cannot play the card marked threat if you're facing a survivor. If you're assisting another player in their encounter, place an assist engage card with the assist side face up to the right of the entity card in their play area, just above that player's row or above any other played assist cards. Skill and gear cards played while in an encounter are placed face up from left to right to the right side of assist cards. These cards cannot be played unless an assist engage card has already been played. When assisting another player, place these cards in that player's play area beside your own assist engage card. Cards that are split into explore and engage should be slid underneath the card to their left so that only the engage side is shown. When an encounter is resolved or at the end of the phase, return cards used to assist to your play area. An encounter begins immediately when you're instructed to encounter a survivor or threat, in which case you will take a card from the corresponding deck and place it in front of you. When you move onto a tile with a threat, or you are on the same tile as a threat at the start of the round. If any of these instances were to happen, for example, we decide to move to a space with a search token, and with that search we encounter a survivor, we will then need to play the corresponding assist engage cards if we have it. Each player will have an assist engage card for threat and one for survivors. On one side of the card it simply says assist, and this will allow you to assist other players regardless of whether it's a survivor or it's a threat. However, the engage side is more specific. There's one for survivors and there's one for threat. If another player had encountered a survivor earlier in the round and you decided to help by playing your survivor assist engage card, you then would not be able to play that card in order to engage with a survivor for the rest of the round, as you've already played it. For that reason, it's very important to consider your options and the rest of the round when deciding to assist other players. If you don't have the corresponding card, you must pass on each of your turns until either the entity is defeated by another player or the round ends. If you would like to assist a player with an encounter, on your turn you may join another player. You may do this regardless of their position relative to you. To assist with an encounter, play an assist engage card with the assist side face up in that player's play area. Again, choose carefully which assist card you play, as you will no longer be able to engage the entity type listed on the engage side of the card if you encounter them later on in this round. You may request any number of items from a player in return for assisting them, and they can be tradable items or potentially rewards from the encounter. They may also request items in return from you. Negotiations must be complete before you join the encounter, and both players must agree on the exchange. If the encounter is resolved successfully, you must exchange the items as agreed. If you fail to resolve the encounter, no items are exchanged. Once you join other players' encounters, your actions are limited until the encounter is resolved, as you will see when we get to an encounter. While in an encounter, the only actions you may perform is to play cards from your hand that have an effect while engaged. If you have no such cards in your hand, you must pass, and your actions are limited this way until the encounter is resolved. Encountered entities may either be hostile or passive, and the system will alert you when facing a hostile entity with a warning as seen here. Other parts of the card are as follows: reward for defeating the entity, their damage resistance, the entity's name, and the setback. What happens if you do not resolve the encounter by the end of the round? A hostile entity is defeated when 1 damage has been dealt for every red shield shown. If they are defeated before the end of the phase, the encounter is resolved. When defeating an entity, receive the rewards shown. All players who engaged or assisted in the encounter receive the experience amount listed on the card, if any. The player who dealt the most damage receives all other listed rewards unless directed otherwise. So in this case, RBC06 dealt 2 damage, so he would receive the rewards shown. On ties, the player who dealt damage last gets these rewards. Remove all the markers from the entity and return them to their respective players' character boards. Return cards played by assisting players to their play area, keeping them arranged as played until the end of the round. Keep the entity card in the play area until the end of the round as well. If a hostile entity is defeated, players are no longer considered engaged in the encounter and may continue to explore during the crew phase if they have actions to do so. However, their engaged card stays in play. If a hostile entity is not defeated before the end of the phase, all engaged and assisting players suffer the setback and receive all effects shown on the setback section of the card. So in this case, Tessera was unable to defeat the paranoid officer, so she would lose 1 level, drop Silicon, and she would reduce her actions by 1. Cards played in a hostile encounter have the following effects when these symbols are shown. Deal 1 damage. Place one of your colored markers from your character board on the entity. Strike. Pull 1 marker from your pool. If it is a colored marker that matches your character color, place it on the entity. It deals 1 damage. If it's a black colored marker, place it on the entity and it deals 2 damage. If the marker is white, your strike misses and the marker is returned to your character board. If you use dialogue, pull a marker from your pool. Dialogue has no effect on hostile entities. Return the marker you pulled to your character board. The fear symbol as well as the trust symbol have no effect on hostile entities at all. Do not do damage. Do not pull a marker from your pool. Peaceful entities are survivors and threats that will not attack the player. Instead, you must use dialogue to either gain their trust and appease them, or instill enough fear in them that they will be intimidated. Peaceful entity cards look very much like hostile ones. They have rewards and setbacks. However, instead of shields, they have these symbols. These symbols here show how much you need them to trust you to resolve the encounter, or how much fear you need to instill in them. When appeasing or intimidating an entity, receive the rewards shown. Much like hostile entities, all players who engaged and assisted with the entity receive the experience amount listed, if any. The player who earned the final trust or fear receive all the other rewards. Again, remove all markers from the entity that were used and return them to your board. Return cards played by assisting players to their play area and make sure to keep them arranged as played until the end of the round. Keep the entity card in the play area until the end of the round as well. When a peaceful entity is appeased or intimidated, players are no longer engaged in the encounter and may continue to explore during the crew phase if they have actions left. If a peaceful entity, much like hostile ones, is not either appeased or intimidated before the end of the phase, all engaged and assisting players will suffer the setback and receive all the effects shown on the setback section of the card. Cards played in peaceful encounters have the following effects when these symbols are shown. These 2 symbols, the strike and wound symbol, have no effect on peaceful entities. However, if you do strike, you pull 1 marker from your pool and return it to your character board. This symbol here allows you to gain 1 trust per symbol shown. Place 1 marker from your character board on the trust side of the entity card. And in this case, this would resolve the entity. However, we're going to carry on with the remainder of the symbols. This allows you to gain 1 fear. Place 1 of your colored markers from your character board on the fear side of the entity. The dialogue symbol has you pull 1 marker from your pool per symbol. If it's a marker matching your character color, earn 1 fear and place it on the fear side of the entity card. If the marker is white, earn 1 trust and place it on the trust side of the entity card. If the marker is black, choose whether you earn 1 trust or 1 fear. Place it on the corresponding side of the entity card. When you're in an encounter with a peaceful survivor, you may give them food. If you do, immediately gain 2 trust with that survivor for each food token used. Place the token on the trust side of the card. Giving food this way does not require an action and must be done on your turn before using your action. Discard used food tokens at the end of the round. After players have used all possible actions during the crew phase, or they passed 2 times losing all their actions, any skill cards that remain in a player's hand are discarded. You can then carry on with Phase 2, the Threat Phase. In the Threat Phase, all cards that were used to explore or engage that were played in the crew phase remain in the play area. Advance the threat marker on the threat track by 1. If advancing the track would cause it to move into a space with an effect on it, complete any and all requirements listed on that current spot as described in the rules for that selected threat. There are 2 threat at the moment with plans to add additional threat in the Kickstarter. I'll quickly go over the Siren threat to give you an idea of how that would unfold. As you can see, during threat levels 1, 2, 6, and 7, nothing happens. On threat level 4 is when we would add the advanced survivors that were set aside at the beginning of setup. Shuffle these survivors marked advanced into the survivor deck. When the threat level reaches 10, the ship you arrived on, the Atlas, departs and everyone loses the game. On threats level 3, 5, 8, as well as 9, you will encounter Siren. When you encounter a threat, refer to the back of the rulebook where it explains to you in detail the steps to take in order to set up the encounter. They will be different for each threat, but for now, I'll walk you through encountering Siren. When the threat track advances to a spot that directs you to encounter Siren, you immediately start a group encounter with the Siren threat card. Each player sets their action track at 2 and draws 2 skill cards. Each player must play an assist engage card with the engaged side face up in order to be able to play cards in this group encounter. Threat are slightly different than hostile and peaceful entity cards. At the top of the card, you'll have your reward as normal. However, if the encounter is successful, you'll receive a reward equal to the amount of damage that you contributed. In this case, 1 to 2, 3 to 4, or 5 plus. Here we have the name of the threat and the amount of damage that must be inflicted to the Siren threat card in order to be successful. So 2 times the number of players, which in this case would equal 4, plus 3 is 7. If the players fail to resolve the encounter, draw a strike card. If that strike card directs you to place Silicon on the threat board, each player with Silicon moves the indicated number of Silicon from their pack to the Silicon space on the threat board if they have it. If the strike card directs a player to place your melody token, the Siren is attempting to lure you. The indicated player must place the corresponding token according to the direction on the card. While your melody token is on a tile, you may only perform actions that would move you closer to the melody token. While your melody tokens are on the board, you may not do any of the following: search, access a Fabricator, add markers to your pool, heal, encounter survivors, peek at cards, sabotage, steal, trade, or use abilities. If you play a card that directs you to do any of these, ignore that symbol. If you move onto a space containing your melody token, remove it from the tile. Once it's removed, you can perform actions as normal. If players failed to resolve Siren's threat card and had Silicon stolen from them, on the next crew phase, any player may choose to face Siren's riddle. To do so, play an assist engage card for the threat with the engaged side face up. Food may not be used to gain trust against Siren's riddle. If Siren's riddle is appeased or intimidated, just like regular survivors, the player may take 1 Silicon from the Silicon space on the threat board if any is available. Only 1 player may encounter Siren's riddle each round. And that's everything you need to know about the Siren and encountering her. Next, we'll move on to the recovery phase. In the recovery phase, each player will tally the experience gained during the crew and threat phase. As you can see, Tessera spent most of the round exploring. She'll gain 1 experience here, 2 here, and 1 here for a total of 4. With that experience, you will first determine if you've gained a new level. Players who earn experience equal to or greater than the value of the next level increase their level by 1. When gaining a level, Advance your marker on the crew status board. Gaining a level does not reduce the amount of experience that can be used to learn a skill. After gaining a level, each player may then learn an available skill in the skill index by spending a number of experience equal to the cost listed on the card. You may not learn more than one skill each round, and any unspent experience does not carry over to the next round. Take turns spending experience gained in the round to learn one available skill. Turn order for learning skills is determined by the number of experience each player earned in the current round from most experience to least. When learning a new skill, take one card for the selected skill from the skill library and place it on top of your discard pile. When taking the last card for a given skill, flip the index card to the side marked unavailable. As mentioned in this previous round, Tessera earned 4 experience. Everything is available right now, and I actually like the look of Humble Approach, which will cost me 4 experience. I will go through the skill library, pick out a Humble Approach, and toss that onto my discard pile. RBC06 also earned 4 experience this round and will also take Humble Approach. As during setup there was only 2 Humble Approaches in the deck, we'll now turn this over to the unavailable side. Once all players have had a chance to learn a new skill, the round is over. Remove all encountered entity cards that were resolved successfully from the game. Then return all encountered entity cards that weren't successfully resolved back to their respective decks and shuffle the deck. If you encountered a threat this round as well, place the threat cards back by the threat board. For each card played during the round with this symbol, roll the crew die once. If this face is rolled on the die, the gear breaks. Place the card on top of your broken gear pile. If it is any other face, return the gear to your hand. Place played skill cards on top of your discard pile and return any played assist engaged cards to your hand. Just a note, any and all markers that were pulled from your pool bag during an encounter, whether successful or not, are returned to your character board, not your pool. And finally, the player with the first player token passes it to the player to their left. Begin a new round, starting with the crew phase. If at any point in the crew phase you manage to return to the hangar tile with the required amount of silicon, depending on your player count, you immediately win the game. And there you have it. That is how you play Silicon Saga. As I mentioned before, this should be hitting Kickstarter around February 2021. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, or if you'd like to suggest a game for my next video, feel free to leave it in the comments section below. As always, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Links for everything in the description below. But until next time, thanks for watching and happy gaming.